In this episode, we'll continue to look at some of the amazing talent that came out of Motown Records and how Motown had an incredible rise to fame and then sort of faded away. But as I said, there was an amazing amount of talent inside Motown Records. The acts included Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, the Supremes, and Diana Ross as a solo act, the Marvelettes, Marvin Gaye, Mary Wells, the Four Tops, Gladys Knight and the Pips, the Isley Brothers, the Jackson Five, Michael Jackson, Junior Walker and the All-Stars, Martha and the Vandellas, the Pointer Sisters, Rare Earth, Edwin Starr, the Temptations, Stevie Wonder, and that's just naming a few of the Motown artists. Now, in the last episode, we looked at two of the artist groups. We looked at Smokey Robinson and the Miracles and Diana Ross and the Supremes. In this episode, we're going to look at two more Motown artist groups. In this case, male vocalist groups, and they are the Temptations and the Four Tops. So you ready to go back to Motor City? Well then, let's drop the needle. The Temptations had a lot of big hits for Motown in the 60s and the 70s. They were five male vocalists and dancers. There was David Ruffin, Melvin Franklin, Otis Williams, Eddie Kendricks, and Paul Williams. Eddie Kendricks and Paul Williams started singing together in church as children. They were signed by Motown in 1961. Smokey Robinson co-wrote the first song that the Temptations had a hit with, and that's The Way You Do the Things You Do, which hit number 11 in 1964. Then in 1965, the Temptations had their first number one hit with the smash My Girl. The Temptations appeared on American Bandstand and also on The Ed Sullivan Show. In 1965, they had three hits in the top 20. It's Growing at number 18, Since I Lost My Baby at 17, and My Baby at 13. Then the following year, in 1966, they scored hits with Get Ready at number 29, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, which went to number 13, which the Rolling Stones covered and sometimes even perform still to today. And Beauty Is Only Skin Deep at number 3. I Know I'm Losing You reached number 8. And the hits just kept coming. In 1967, they scored again. All I Need went to number 8. You're My Everything went to number 6. In 1967 and 68, as we've talked about before, things were changing in Motown. Berry Gordy decided to shake up some of the groups, and the Miracles became Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, and the Supremes became Diana Ross and the Supremes, highlighting the vocalist for each of these groups, the main vocalist. Well, David Ruffin was the main vocalist in the Temptations, and so he demanded that the group be called David Ruffin and the Temptations. Obviously, this caused a rift inside the band. They had a hit with I Wish That It Would Rain, but tensions with Ruffin were at an all-time high. And then in 1968, David Ruffin got fired, but he didn't go quietly. He was replaced by Dennis Edwards, who was a friend of Ruffin's, and Ruffin actually coached him when he first came into the group. But as I said, Ruffin didn't go quietly. What he would do is he would follow the Temptations, and when they were playing, he would jump up on the stage and grab the mic away from Dennis Edwards and start singing. Obviously, this caused a lot of consternation, and the Temptations hired extra security to keep Ruffin off of the stage when they were performing. Once Edwards settled in, the Temptations hit again with a psychedelic hit called Cloud 9, which was influenced by the music of Sly and the Family Stone. Cloud 9 reached number 6, and they were the first Motown act to be awarded a Grammy for that song, Cloud 9. There was tensions with Ruffin, there were lawsuits, but the band continued on, and the next year they had another hit. In 1969, they hit it with I'm Gonna Make You Love Me, which also featured Diana Ross and the Supremes. It went to number 2. Runaway Child, Running Wild went to number 6. And I Second That Emotion with Diana Ross and the Supremes again, and I Can't Get Next to You were both hits. In 1970, they go psychedelic, this time with Psychedelic Shack, which is a big hit for them as well. They follow it with Ball of Confusion, That's What the World Is Today, which reaches number 3 on the charts. And then in 1971, the Temptations hit the number 1 slot again with a song called Just My Imagination, Running Away With Me, which again, the Rolling Stones covered. Personnel changes had an effect on the group, but they continued on, and in 1972, they had a hit with a song called Papa Was a Rolling Stone. And it was a 12-minute song, which got edited down to a 7-minute song, and it reached number 1. In 1989, the Temptations were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They continued to record up to 1994, but only with minimal success. And up to today, Otis Williams, the only remaining founder of the Temptations, continues to tour with a band called the Temptations. Now, the second group we're going to look at was also a big hit machine for Hitsville, USA. And they're the Four Tops. They began while they were still high school students in Detroit. They are Levi Stubbs, Abdul Duke Faker, Ronaldo Obi Benson, and Lawrence Payton. They started in 1953, and the four of them stayed together up till 1997 with no personnel changes, which is very rare for Motown. They played their first gig at a birthday party, and in 1956 they signed with Chess Records, and they called themselves the Four Ames. But then they very quickly had to change their name because they didn't want to be confused with the Ames brothers. They continued working up until 1963, but they had really no hits, but they worked really hard on their stage presence and their vocal stylings. And then in 1963, Berry Gordy signed them to Motown Records. When they first came to Motown, they sang backup for Martha and the Vandellas and the Supremes. But then the songwriting team of Holland Dozier Holland wrote a song for them that became a big hit. The song was called Baby I Need Your Lovin', and it reached number 11 on the charts. Now, the sound of the Four Tops was distinctive in that the lead singer, Stubbs, was a baritone, and most lead singers at that time were tenors. In 1965, they had another hit with I Can't Help Myself, Sugar Pie Honey Bunch. And then the following year, they came out with one of Motown's biggest hits, Reach Out and I'll Be There. It hit number 1 in the US and the UK. And it was followed up by a song that sounded an awful lot like that. And this one was called Standing in the Shadows of Love. And it also was a hit for them. In 1967, they released 2 songs, Bernadette and You Keep Running Away. Then they decided to take on some mainstream songs. So they did Tim Hardin's If I Were a Carpenter and even covered the Left Bank's Walk Away Renee. But as we've talked about before, in 1967, when the songwriting team of Holland Dozier Holland left Motown, well, the hits for the Four Tops pretty much dried up. And then Berry Gordy decides that he's going to move Motown to Los Angeles, and he wants all the groups, all the artists, to follow him and relocate to Los Angeles. But the Four Tops were already feeling neglected by the label, and so they refused to go. So they left Motown and signed with ABC Dunhill Records. And then they had hits with Keeper of the Castle and Ain't No Woman Like the One I've Got. Then the group pretty much disappeared till 1981 when they resurfaced with a new recording contract and a new hit record, which was called When She Was My Girl. Then in 1983, in a rather surprising move, they re-signed with Motown Records, and they released an album called Back Where I Belong, which one side of that album was produced by none other than Holland Dozier Holland. In 1985, the Four Tops appeared at the Live Aid concert to a worldwide audience. Basically, from about 1980 on, they concentrated on touring and performing live, and they were doing a European Christmas tour in 1988, and they were scheduled to fly back to the States from London. And they were scheduled to fly on the Pan Am Flight 103, which blew up over Lockerbie, Scotland. Fortunately for them, they missed the flight. So they weren't on the flight. They then took a later flight out of London back to the States. Then in June of 1977, Lawrence Payton, one of the founding members, dies. In 1994, the Four Tops were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The group continues on. But in 2008, their lead singer, Levi Stubbs, dies. A version of the group continues to tour today, but it contains none of the original members. Now, as usual, I've created a Spotify playlist where you can listen to some of the songs that I've talked about in this episode. And here's the link, and I'll also put it in the comments below. Whenever you talk about Motown Records, you got to talk about the amazing talent that they had. But when we think about the Temptations and the Four Tops, we can certainly remember a lot of great music that they gave us. So thanks, guys, and thank you for watching. Until the next time, keep a rockin'.
If you liked this episode, hit the like button, and you can also leave me a comment down below, and I'll respond to you. If you subscribe, we'll let you know when future episodes come out.